Welcome to CT Politics TV. I am your host, Jimmy J. We have all the latest headlines affecting Connecticut. First, I would like to welcome you to the first episode of CT Politics Live in 2023. Everyone here hopes you and your family had a great holiday season. And now that the money spending season is over with, we can get back to business. New York's new state laws started on New Year's Day. A series of new laws went into effect on Sunday, including deposits on some beverage bottles, protections for children's health, and erasure of some cannabis criminal records, and a bump in pay for state lawmakers. Convictions eligible for erasure include possession of 4 ounces or less of cannabis, use or possession in manufacturing, selling, or possessing with the intent to sell 4 ounces or less, or having 6 or fewer plants grown in the person's home for personal use. The state's so-called bottle bill is also being expanded to include deposits of 5 cents on hard seltzer, hard cider, plant water or plant-infused drinks, juice tea, coffee, kombucha tea, and sports or energy drinks. State lawmakers will also see a pay increase when the next legislative session begins on January 4th. Their base salary of $28,000 to $40,000. Various leadership positions in the state legislature will also go up, with a base salary ranging between $44,000 and $52,000. Also going into effect on Sunday was provisions for a child's mental health law that include developing a screening tool to help pediatricians and emergency room doctors diagnose mental and behavioral health conditions and substance abuse disorders in children. Additionally, beginning in July, the State Education Department will be issuing annual surveys to school districts seeking information about each district's employment of school mental health specialists. Another law went into effect on January 1, will require primary care providers and hospital emergency departments to offer HIV testing to patients ages 13 and older. There will also be a tweak to how hate crimes are reported. Existing law requires municipal police departments, resident state troopers, and constables to report hate crimes to state police. The new law will now require all law enforcement units to use a standardized form through the Police Officer Standard and Training Council, or POST, to be reported to the new Hate Crimes Investigative Unit within 14 days after receiving information about a hate crime in their town or municipality. Finally, low-cost bank accounts will be coming to financial institutes as well, as a law goes into effect Sunday designed to minimize fees, overdraft penalties, and deposit requirements for certain accounts. Among the changes is no additional charge on debit cards, ATM access, deposits, and cash checking. The Day's Paul Schoner reported that the forecast that the revitalization of State Pier in New London will be largely complete by February and ready by spring to support offshore wind energy development. Could either mark a positive turning point for the controversial project or just serve as a prelude to more disappointment and criticism. Connecticut Port Authority Executive Director Ulysses Hammond made the announcement at the authority's December meeting that the project is on schedule and should be ready to accommodate large vessels that will transport the components to build a dozen wind turbines for the South Fork Wind Field. The South Fork project off Long Island by the Ørsted Eversource Partnership is just the start of what is expected to be an extensive construction of wind fields off the Atlantic seaboard. New London's prime location and lack of any bridges to interfere with floating the towering turbines out to sea make it a preferred departure point. The city's participation in offshore wind development should provide a significant economic boost in the region and diversify an economy overly dependent on the defense industry, referring to Skorsky and I'm assuming Groton. But a lot could go wrong given the past handling of the project by the Port Authority and the state. The surprise will come if things went smoothly, he reported. For one thing, Hammond's forecast could prove overly optimistic. If the pier is not ready by spring, Ørsted and Eversource would turn to contingency plans. They must have them. It is not hard to imagine the criticism and legal entanglements that would generate. And hanging over the Port Authority are ongoing investigations. In March, the Port Authority received subpoenas from a federal grand jury in New Haven seeking records dating as far back as the authority's origin in 2016. While the Department of Justice investigation appears focused on potential past misconduct rather than current authority administration, any resultant indictments would further damage the authority's image and could raise questions about the legitimacy of contracts signed back then. Democrat Representative Himes says TikTok's a national security threat. CCP demands data from companies all the time. Breitbart's Ian Hatchett reported on Wednesday, edition of NBC's MTP Now. Representative Jim Hines of Connecticut said that TikTok's a national security threat because the Chinese Communist Party can go to any company that is Chinese-owned and any company that is in China and say, give us all this personal information on your user base. That happens every single day. That was a quote from Representative Hines. Hines stated TikTok, like Huawei, like any number of other Chinese-owned assets or companies, is a threat in the sense that the Chinese government can go to a Chinese company and say, give us all of this information. So whether or not Americans who are not in sensitive government roles should use TikTok, I think an open question, something that can be debated. You can make your own prudential judgments on that, but the notion that it should not be on government phones, that to me doesn't strike me as that controversial, he stated. He added, well, it's a national security threat, and I want to use the language carefully. It is not a national security threat in the sense that the people who use it are going to be at a personal risk, but it is a threat in the sense that the Chinese Communist Party can go to any company that is Chinese-owned and grab all your information off their user database. That happens every single day in China, he says. The Massa case, judge questions restitution before sentencing, reported Brian Zahn. In West Haven, with sentencing date pending for 4 people who participated in a scheme to defraud West Haven of more than $1 million in federal pandemic funding, a federal judge said he has no reason to believe the co-defendants will have the means to make an attempt to repaying restitution. U.S. District Judge Omar Williams, who accepted the guilty plea of former state rep Michael DeMassa and 2 of his co-conspirators, and presided over the 8-day trial of a third in connection with that scheme, wrote in a December 23rd notice to the 4 defendants that he is seeking information about available funds that could be applied towards restitution. None of the co-defendants in the present case is detained pending sentencing, yet the court is unaware of any funds whatsoever having been collected or set aside for the immediate payment of any portion of restitution that this court potentially might impose. Considering those factors together, within the context of the length and time of these cases have been pending, the court is left with no reason to believe that any co-defendant will have the means, or perhaps even determination, to make any genuine attempt to pay any potential order of restitution, particularly after they are sentenced for their felonious conduct, and after they incur any related collateral consequences, he wrote in his notice. DeMassa pleaded guilty to 3 counts on conspiracy to commit wire fraud, admitting his role to conspiring with 3 people to use his position and authority as City Hall employee to submit fraudulent invoices to produce checks for his collaborators and then to lend to cash. Prior to his plea for a cumulative $1.2 million in theft, his wife Lauren DeMassa and City Hall colleague John Bernardo pled guilty to 1 count of conspiracy to commit wire fraud for their role in collaborating on the theft of $147,776, and then $636,783 of that $1.2 million total, respectively. Dan Haar, how much will you? Yes. So according to the Hearst, Connecticut media, Brian A. Pounds wrote, how much will you pay for electricity? There's actually a calculator out there that might help you. If there is any good news about the electricity rate shock that starts next week, it's a jolt might not be quite as bad as the headlines would appear. That's some good news. Scant comfort, I know. As of January 1st, most of us will have to pay a lot more for at least the next 6 months to keep the lights on, the milk cold, and our dawn to dusk electricity humming. Exactly how much more? We designed a calculator, or you can type in either your monthly kilowatt hour draw or your monthly payments to see your monthly payment and the amount of increase, starting when you shout Happy New Year. By now, you've learned that generation rates for customers of both Connecticut Utilities, Eversource, and United Illumination will double started January 1st. You might have heard that the average customer will have to pay an extra $85 per month for Eversource power or $76 per month for UI. It's bad, but it's not quite that bad. The median household for electricity use, the point where half are higher and half are lower, will pay an extra $55 a month for Eversource service, which amounts to 41% hike. UI customers at the midpoint will face an extra charge of $44.50 a month, or 36%. And if this helps, based on what you're seeing in neighborhood, states, and in global energy markets, the new prices for juice were more or less unavoidable. They're on this website, and I'll give it to you later. There's actually a calculator on there. You punch in your monthly bill, it calculates the 41%, and it'll show you what your new bill should be. But you probably care more about your bill than about the complex reasons behind it. The calculator works for customers who use Eversource and UI as their default generation supplier, in addition to paying the utilities to deliver the wattages to our home. If you use an alternate power supplier, your rates will be different. So the website to go to is www.ctinsider.com/projects/2022/electric-bill-eversource-UI. Again, I'll repeat that because it's extremely long. www.ctinsider.com/projects/2022/electric-bill-eversource-UI. I actually did that before I came on, and it was like $56. My bill looks like it's going to increase. So there's that. Political clashes leave CT baby bond program in limbo. In June 2021, State Treasurer Sean Wooden made history in Connecticut with the passage of the CT baby bond program, a first of its kind statewide policy aimed at narrowing the racial wealth gap. The concept, introduced by a pair of economics over a decade ago, is simple enough. Set aside and invest money on behalf of your child born into poor family. When they turn 18, they can use the funds to pay for life-changing opportunities that people born into wealth access with comparative ease. A down payment on a home, tuition for school, seed capital to start or invest in a business. Poor children of any race would qualify, but because Black, Latino, and Indigenous children experience poverty at disproportionate rates, they would stand to benefit the most from the program. I witnessed firsthand how generational poverty holds a community and individuals back, says Wooden, a Black man who grew up in a poor neighborhood in Hartford on the day he announced the proposal. Supporters around the country celebrated Wooden and the passage of his legacy program, heralding Connecticut as a leader in addressing racial inequality. But nearly a year and a half after Connecticut baby bonds were signed into law, it is yet to become a reality, largely because of political interference from Governor Ned Lamont's office. How the governor's office led a campaign of quiet but fierce opposition to the program from the time of its passage, weakening it at several points on its path to implementation. With a last-minute change to the program funding structure, then by stalling meetings between the treasurer's office and agency partners and arranging for a 2-year delay in launching the program. The governor and his spokesperson did not say specifically why they supported the program's delay, but administration officials told the CT Mirror that along the way, they objected to how Wooden structured the program's funding, which included an automatic authorization for its bonding that they claim sidestepped the governor's authority as chair of the State Bond Commission. The administration also said agency heads from the Department of Social Services and the Office of Policy and Management had concerns about the program's implementation. The opposition was stronger than the coalition that Wooden built to support it. People close to the situation said Wooden failed to create the momentum to ensure the program's funding would pass, and his stunning April announcement that he would not seek another term further derailed the program's support and left him with little political capital in Democratic circles. Last year, the legislation voted to delay the program's start date by 2 years from July 2021 to July 1, 2023. But the records obtained by the CT Mirror cast doubt on whether the baby bonds program will take effect this year as planned, or ever. Julia Bergman from the CT Post reported as a new highway tax begins, CT trucking industry weighs opinions, including legal challenges. A highway use tax for heavy trucks, estimated to raise $90 million in a year, is set to take effect, is in effect now as of January 1st. With a new highway use tax set, hold on one second, I'm sorry, I lost my place. If we can't find a legislative or regulatory remedy, then at that point, all bets are off and we need to look at all avenues for redress, said John Blair, president of the Motor Transport Association of Connecticut. We are assessing whether or not there are legal remedies that we could seek if we're not going to get a legislative or regulatory remedy. Blair said he thinks it's unlikely the General Assembly will make any changes to the new law, such as repeal or delay it, as the industry has pressed for, and a recent attended by about 100 MTAC members, Blair said many truckers were still seeking guidance about the implementation of the new tax, which is expected to generate about $90 million per year for transportation improvement in Connecticut. The tax applies to large commercial trucks which carry a classification between Class 8 and Class 13, with fees ranging from 2.5 cents per mile for vehicles weighing 26,000 to 28,000 pounds to 17.5 cents per mile for trucks weighing more than 80,000 pounds. The first payment is due by February 28th. The day's Erica Mosier, Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg, to visit New London this week. Pete Buttigieg will be visiting New London on Wednesday to highlight the recently announced $158 million federal grant to the Gold Star Memorial Bridge that the Gold Star Memorial Bridge is getting for repairs to the northbound span. It is one of a few visits from the Biden administration throughout the country Wednesday to highlight the impact of the bipartisan infrastructure law that Biden signed November 2021, also known as the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. President Joe Biden will be visiting Kentucky near Cincinnati on Wednesday and will be joined by Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, Senate Sherrod Brown from Ohio, Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear, and Ohio Governor Mike DeWine, according to an administrative spokesperson. Vice President Kamala Harris will be in Chicago on Wednesday. On Thursday, Representative Joe Courtney of the 2nd District announced that the Federal Highway Administration has awarded Connecticut $158 million for repairs to the Gold Star Memorial Bridge. This is through the agency's Competitive Bridge Investment Program, which the IIJA established. The northbound span of the bridge, the longest in Connecticut, began the first phase of a $407.7 million rehabilitation in 2020. The Gold Star Memorial Bridge was built in 1943 and has seen superstructure work and other rehabilitation projects over the years. But the condition of the northbound bridge prevents the passage of oversized vehicles. CT Pharma has room to grow ahead of state's recreational cannabis launch. As Connecticut prepares to begin adult use recreational cannabis use sales early this year, marijuana growers in the state have been expanding production in an attempt to allay any supply concerns when the market launches. And some marijuana growers are keeping an eye on the market for more expansion opportunities in the future. CT Pharma, one of the 4 active cannabis cultivators in the state, have 2 40,000 square foot rooms in its Rocky Hill properties for expansion in the future. If built across 2 floors, the company could add 160,000 square feet of grow space in those areas without having to relocate or do exterior add-ons. The company currently has about 110,000 square feet of cannabis grow space, but the whole facility is 216,000 square feet. There's a lot of room to expand out there, says Ferrarsi, CT Pharma's executive vice president for the North region. Recreational cannabis sales are set to begin in Connecticut on January 10th when retail dispensaries open. The product on store shelves will come from the state's 4 medical growers that have switched to cultivation licenses. Advanced Grow Labs, owned by Green Thumb Industries, CT Pharma, owned by Verano Holdings, Cureleaf, and TheraPlant, owned by Green Rose Holding Company. All of the companies are owned by multi-state operators. In addition to growing cannabis, the state's current cultivators manufacture the product in various forms. In early December, Ferrarsi said CT Pharma had 400,000 pre-rolled joints ready for the launch of recreational sale, and more were being made. But hey, that's not even 1 joint per person, so we're going to need to make more, Ferrarsi says. I can't wait to talk to our guest tonight about the licensing portion of this marijuana project. So that should be interesting. With pot now legal, Monroe eliminates a police dog from budget, reported Andy Tasubas. In Monroe, the police department has decided not to replace a retired police dog after the legalization of cannabis in Connecticut reduced its role in vehicle searches. The department has operated 2 canine units for about a decade, but with the legalization of adult use cannabis in Connecticut last year, police changed tactics and began using police dogs only in drug searches with a warrant, according to Police Chief Keith White. White said the need for the second dog is greatly reduced because our dog would hit on marijuana. Some police can't untrain the dog. That means the dog would now be altering to a substance that is illegal, he said. Oh, I see what you're saying. We obviously don't want him to do that, White said. Police will continue to request canine units from the neighboring towns to assist them if their remaining it's not a Bulgarian. Their current dog, Riggs, is off duty. Riggs, like as in Lethal Weapon 4, or Lethal Weapon, I'm assuming. There is no sense continuing to spend money when we have other assets available to use in the area that could perform the same task, White said. The German Shepherd, the department retired in September, and Riggs were trained to detect cannabis. Legalization reduces the cases in which the dogs could put a training to use. In 2022, Monroe police deployed Riggs 14 times, mostly in missing persons cases, White said. Deployment stats for Murphy in 2022 were not immediately available. I'm sorry, that was in 2021. Those were the stats that I gave you. While comparable numbers for previous years were also unavailable, White said before 2019, police dogs were typically deployed more than twice as often as this year. Along with a reduced demand for police dogs, eliminating one of the canine units also reduces costs, White said. The budget for the remaining dog is about $2,500 for costs that include food, vet services, and training equipment, he said. Okay, so now those are our headlines here in Connecticut. Now we're going to take a quick look at the weather. Turning cloudy with spotty drizzly rain, that annoying rain that you never know. You don't have a setting on your car for that, right? It's just the annoying rain, the drizzle. All right, there's going to be a low around 36 degrees tonight. In the morning, it will be mild with occasional rain and then the annoying drizzle again. It'll become breezy in the afternoon with a high of 50 degrees. Then it's going to turn really cloudy at night. Breezy, a little mild, a little rain in the evening with a low about 48 degrees. So those are your headlines for CT Politics TV. We're going to take a short break, and then when we come back, we are going to welcome our guest, representative of the 151st District, Harry Aurora. So stick around. We'll be right back.
CT Politics TV and the Connecticut Taxpayers Union present Unaffordable America with Daniel Kent Newmeyer, Joe Patrina's band Little House, focusing on Connecticut.
Now get yourself ready, go cat go. Ooh yeah.
Entertaining and taking an educational look at nonpartisan issues of affordable living in America.
Born in a land where we wave 'em high.
All points of view are welcome.
And we got blue angels climbing in the sky. I'm the luckiest guy in America. I'm the luckiest man born in America.
Join the Connecticut Taxpayers Union right now at ctpolitics.tv.
Born in America.
All right, welcome back to CT Politics TV. I am Jimmy J. Our guest tonight is the representative of the 101st District in Connecticut, which covers Greenwich and I think parts of Cobb. He also ran for state treasurer in this past election. He's one of my favorite representatives because I've talked to him probably a lot more than most. But let's welcome Representative Harry Aurora. Good evening, Mr. Aurora. How are we doing tonight?
Good evening. Good evening. I'm doing well, and it's so nice to be with you. Thank you for having me on your program.
Thank you for being here. So first, I like to do this little segment, and I think I'm hoping that it catches on with the other hosts that I do the show with, is just a little get to know your representative. So, you know what? Actually, before that, how was your holidays? I hope you had a good holiday season.
Yes, indeed. Happy New Year. It was a great holiday season and relaxing because after the 10-month or nearly a year spent on the campaign trail, I could spend time with the family on the weekend. So cannot complain. And I hope all your viewers had a happy holidays and a relaxing time over the last couple of weeks, and a happy New Year to them.
Well, I can tell you personally, my checkbook is really, really happy to be on a holiday right now. Does anybody use checkbooks anymore?
That's right. Who does, man?
I'm showing my age here, Mr. Aurora. Yeah, you know. So, but yeah. So my first segment I always like to do is to get to know your representative. So if you can give me a little bit of your background, where did you go to college? Where are you from? Are you married? Do you have kids? How did you get into politics? That kind of stuff.
Sure. I spent most of my life in the private sector. I spent 20 plus years nearly 25 years in the investment management and finance business. First working for others and then running my own investment management business, managing money for institutions. And about 5 years ago, I switched tracks and pivoted my career and came into public service. I ran initially a federal race and then ran for state office and was elected as a state rep, served 2 terms as the state rep from the 151st district, as you mentioned. I have a young family, or actually not young anymore. My eldest is have 3 kids. My wife and I are raising 3 kids here in southwestern Connecticut. 16, 15, 13, and teenagers, they started really, how that goes. They want to not be with you as much anymore, but really fun times.
Are they into sports?
Oh yeah, both my boys and my daughter, they are definitely into sports, and my son is now he's a big track guy. He played football. He's very fast. And my younger son is big in basketball. So I don't think he has the height or some of the skills which I should have given him for doing more in basketball, but he's really good and very interested in it and very passionate about playing the game. And so,
well, you just got to remember Spud Webb. You remember Spud Webb back in the day? He was like 5'8".
That's right. That's right.
I mean, so anything's possible. Anything's possible.
Like, yeah, maybe I shouldn't be saying that. Yes, and he's really, it's the most important thing for children is, are they really interested? Are they having a good time? And are they putting in what they need to put in? Because sports really bring the discipline and a lot of other good things to their lives.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Sports is I think it's so important for children to be in sports. My son was in baseball. My daughter was in basketball. So, I mean, it's very important to get that team, to learn how to be a team, to learn how to work together as a team, and I really like the settling differences portion of it too, which goes untalked about in sports.
Right.
You have a lot of differences in sports, right? And you got to learn to be on that court, that field, that pitch, whatever, and not fight, so it really takes a lot of discipline. And I, as a military man, I was in the Marines for 20 years. I love discipline.
Yeah, and as you said, sports really teach you that you're going to win some, you're going to lose some, and have the sportsman spirit about it, and play hard to win the next one if you didn't get this one. And how you have to work at it. It doesn't come, everything is not just basically, magic. It's the magic is through your hard work and through your discipline.
Well, don't you think that's kind of the tenor of this generation now, that they just expect everything? Like they expect college tuition. They expect you see that story that there's a college there's a group of people that they're demanding A's for the time that they were not in college.
Yeah, and that's just not right. And I think you're so right that we have to create the good incentives, the right incentives. And there will always be people asking for that, for preferential treatment or making excuses. And what we want to teach our kids is to take responsibility, to put in the work. And what we want to do in public policy and in the in government and in our system is for it to be fair. That those who work hard, those who have the merit, those who are putting in the hours and working smartly, can get the opportunity.
Speaking of fairness, I want to turn to the upcoming legislative session because it's a fair and balanced House of Representatives up there. So, what should the people of Connecticut expect of the Republican Party to get some of their agenda across, or is it just going to be an uphill battle fighting the Democratic supermajority?
It's going to be really tough. It's going to be really tough because the numbers, as you know, it's 100 to or 98 to 56. Or am I right in saying it? Oh, no, 98 to 53 in the
Yes.
House. So really outnumbered, and 22 to 14, or 14 Republicans and 22 Democrats in the Senate, in the state Senate. So it's a really uphill battle to get much of an agenda really passed. But what I really like about my colleague, who are going to be my ex-colleagues, in a couple of days,
We're
is
going to
that
talk about that too, if you don't mind.
sure. No, all questions. I love all your questions. What I really appreciate about my colleagues is that they will find a way to find common ground, to figure out parts of the agenda where they can convince that this is common, this is for Connecticut, not for one party or the other. And they really need to be able to use that skill set, that capacity to get things done. The other side is going to just push back on the not so good legislation that may come from the other side, from the Democrats, and that's where you and I, press yourself as a journalist and myself as an outsider, from a political perspective as a politician, have to also push back that such ideas, when they don't work for the state of Connecticut and for most of our constituents, need to be pushed back and dropped.
Good. Absolutely. What do you like? I'm trying to talk to Vinnie Candelora sometime soon, but what do you think the Republican Party went wrong? I mean, because we got shellacked, Mister. I mean, there's no other word about it. We lost seats instead of
That's
gaining.
right.
So,
That's
I
right.
mean, what do you think the Republican Party did wrong, or what do you think we can do in 2 to 4 years?
Listen, what happened here was somewhat of a federal, some of the couple of federal issues, which really, for not so good reasons, for reasons which are not fair, made some of a few percent of people in Connecticut, because of the Dobbs decision, really not come towards, not vote our ticket. That's one. The second, I think, it's the top of the ticket. I think the governor Lamont was able to put a narrative out that he had been very fiscally conservative. Now, we know that that's not true. We know that there was some number of factors which are more, not his doing, not the governor's doing, but extra money we got from the federal government, inflation. People think inflation is good for government revenues, because everything, as prices go up, you pay more tax, you pay more for, or we pay more for, let's say, a shirt or whatever we're buying, or a car. And we also pay more sales taxes, because sales taxes are 7% or whatever you buy. So there was this increase in tax revenues. And I think what happened was the governor was able to say, that's what I did. That's how I am, increased revenues and kept costs in control. And so I was able to convert a deficit into surplus. And that's just as far as truth as one can see. But I do think that he was able to get a number of people to vote for him. And once the top of the ticket went his way, a number of other races also followed. So it was not right. It was not fair, but it was a narrative he was able to pull off. And that's what basically an analysis it shows for me what happened.
You mentioned the top of the ticket, and it seems to be a common trend that everybody says, the top of the ticket affects, the bottom part. Do you, in Harry Aurora's opinion, think Bob should have ran again?
Listen, Bob ran a good race. He ran a good race. I'm not going to sit here and say, take anything away from him. I think, the narrative which Governor Lamont basically was able to put forward, perhaps Bob could have pushed back on it more, a little further,
Yeah.
in stronger words or stronger campaign. But there were some. These were out of control things which happened, and they were true. We did get more money from the federal government. That's just a fact. Anybody who wants to take a look can take a look, and that's what happened. We did get benefit that many of the programs were unable to spend as much money during COVID times just because you were restricted to be able to spend money. Many agencies could not spend money, and so many of those savings were not the administration's policies. They just happened because of, call it, acts of God.
They're just reaping the benefits. Yeah.
Yeah, they reap the benefits, and that narrative cost us dearly. And I'm not going to sit here and say, well, that was because of our candidate. It happened. We see what the reasons why it happened. Similarly, inflation is such a cost to the economy and to our constituents and to our residents in our community, but it helped the budget, and that's really what credit. The credit for that, for that pain was taken by the governor, and that's really unfortunate.
I mean, it is, I guess. I mean, whoever's sitting in there would have benefited. If it was Bob, he would have benefited from it too. So, I mean, it's just the luck of the draw. And like you said, just an act of God, right? So I got to ask you one more question about the election, and then I want to move on to a topic that I think we're going to have a lot of fun with. During the election, it was reported that you actually sued the independent party. And I didn't know about this. Can you tell us why? Can you fill us in a little and tell us a little bit about that?
So this is what happened with the independent party. They ran someone against or nominated someone for the treasurer role when they did not have the right to nominate. They had not followed the rules. And, everyone has to follow rules, whether it be an individual, whether it be a party, whether it be a business. That's just how our system works. And they had not followed the rules. They were supposed to file their bylaws, and they never did. And so they did not have a right to, nominate anyone for the role of the office of the treasurer. And not only that, they actually nominated someone who was, as I would say, a proxy candidate, the candidate never even put up a website. The candidate had no interest to run. The candidate really never raised any money, never spent any money. In my hundreds of visits around the state, I never saw the candidate. So it was just a candidate who was put forward as a sham candidate to really benefit the other side. It was really a two-way race, and considering that it got very close, it was being run as a spoiler candidate. So for those two reasons, but primarily for the first reason, that they did not have the right under law because they had not obeyed the rules. And what's interesting is that the judge agreed with us. The judge agreed that they had broken the law or not followed the laws, and they did not have a right to nominate someone. But however, the judge said, well, it's too late now. You should have come out a week earlier or something like that. And that really did not add up. But we were in no position or no interest to appeal that. In reality, when most lawyers looked at what happened, we won the case because the judge did come out and the honorable judge said, well, really, they should have filed the bylaws. And I hope they do in the future and follow the laws. And that's very important to all of us, that whether it be individuals, whether it be businesses, or whether it be political parties, nobody's above the law, and everybody should follow the rules of law.
It's an interesting topic. I was talking to a friend of mine. In today's day and age, right? You and I are having a conversation from two ends of the state, right? You can go out on Twitter, you can go out on Instagram, you can go out on Facebook. There's millions. Donald Trump's, Truth Social, I guess. I mean, there's millions of ways that we can connect with what's going on in politics now. And I really think that this is an opportunity for someone in politics, in the legislature, to be like, hey, here's how transparent I'm going to be. I'll put everything out on Twitter. I'll put everything out on Instagram. I really think it's an opportunity for politicians right now that they can utilize social media and get the truth out there and get actual, plans, what people are doing, and not this rhetoric, right? The rhetoric is just, it's just awful. It truly is.
You do bring a very important point, which is there is the distribution channel available, which is social media. And I think it's now up to us as politicians, up to us as leaders, to really be able to take the message. But here's Jimmy, what's the real difficult part is most folks have very little time. Everybody is busy trying to make a living, trying to make sure that they spend time with their family. So it is our responsibility to take some of these topics, which may be complex, which are noisy. They may not be complex, but everybody's, going at each other, simplify them, and then, tell kind of in the simplest of words, in the most fair manner, those complex issues. And we can talk about, for example, energy. Right now, energy costs are really harming our residents. Costs have gone up by overall supply costs have doubled. Overall costs for both natural gas and electricity bills are going to be 50 to 60% up. And people are really, really upset and suffering and in pain. It's not easy to say, oh, now you got to pay $150 more a month or $80 more a month.
Yeah.
And it's really something which we have to explain to them. Listen, what are the policies which have led us there? How are we going to get out of this? Because that's what they expect of us as politicians and leaders. And if we don't do that, we're not doing our job. Because just as you said, we have the format. We can't say, oh, the newspaper is not publishing us, or the TV is not covering us. Really, we can get to them using social media, through podcasts and so on. But we have to be straightforward. We have to be fair. We have to be succinct, right? We have to be and get to the point and explain what's going on, how we're going to do things differently. And if other politicians do not agree, try to build consensus using these tools.
Absolutely. I actually, if I was to run for some kind of office, even like here in Plainville where I live, like a town council seat, I would just be on social media.
Yeah.
That's where I would be. I think a campaign I literally think a campaign could be won just on social media, because that's where everybody is. Social media nowadays gives everybody a 30-second glimpse into the world, and that's it. You made a great point. People don't have time, so they need that 30-second glimpse. And that's
exactly right. People will give you 30 seconds, but now what you see in those 30 seconds is what matters.
Right. You know what? Yeah, you're 100% right, actually. I want to shift gears a little bit to get back to current politics, right, and what's going on in our state right now. With the election going the way it did, there's going to be some new commissioner positions coming into play. Can you talk to our viewers about those a little bit?
That's right. So although we always think of the administration as the governor and the speaker of the house, so as to say, or leaders, but it's really the people who work behind, which is very important. So for example, in Connecticut, there may be somewhat like 25 commissioners. You can you can think of them as the cabinet. These are people who are leaders of their agencies, and you're going to see a few changes. So Governor Lamont so far looks like is going to keep a number of members of his team. The OPM commissioner is going to stay the same, and so on and so forth. But there's some changes. The most important changes are going to be in human services. The DSS, Department of Social Services, is going to have a new commissioner. The current commissioner is going to stay on as a consulting or as an advisor. And Andrea Barton Reeves, who used to run the paid family leave, is going to come over. So that's an important change. We'll see how that impacts the various programs. The Department of Social Services runs the largest expense item, the Husky program or Medicaid. That's going to be very important. We're going to wait and see if there are any changes out there. Department of Transportation is going to see a new commissioner, and it's Garrett Eucalipto who's going to take over now. So, Commissioner Gilletti. And that's also going to be seen if there are going to be changes in the strategy overall or how we implement our transportation program. And so we'll be watching that from the outside, and I'm sure the legislators are thinking about it as
Have
to
you
what these changes mean for them.
have you heard anything from the inside? How these people, if they have agendas out there, or they're trying to push anything of their agenda? Have you heard anything about the
Jimmy,
new
the most
commissioners?
important thing which is really being discussed is we do have a reasonable amount of surplus, just as we discussed, because of inflation, because of federal dollars, all the above, we have a surplus coming in. And the big talk out there is, what are we going to do with the surplus? The governor has indicated that he would like to do some kind of a middle class tax cut, right? And I think the Republicans last time around had suggested some kind of a across the board tax cut. And so that's what's going to be seen. Is it going to be bipartisan agreement between both sides? How are we going to take this money? It's a quite substantial amount of money. It's about $2 billion, right? It's actually even more than that. It's right now in December, the comptroller reported that is $1.8 billion from the volatility cap, which is going to come in and be available, another billion from a surplus, which is going to be available. So in all, $2.8 billion will be available to be given back to the public or to pay down debt or whatever it may be. And I think it is quite reasonable to expect that part of it should be returned to the public in terms of lower taxes. And how that's going to be happen, what taxes for which specific part of the demographic or the taxpayer are going to be reduced is all going to be the big talk. And that's a discussion which is going on in the back rooms. I'm not privy to that, but I do think that's a big discussion. And our constituents, your listeners, our residents need to pay close attention and get their voice, their opinion known. Where would they want this? How would they want this money to come back to them?
Personally, this is just a personal side note for me, right? Have you ever heard of anybody pitching the idea of raising the sales tax and doing away with the income tax here in Connecticut?
Well, that's the sales tax is what they call in economic terms somewhat regressive. That is, everybody pays it. If you make no money, you still have to pay, and you have only, one item to buy, you still pay it. So the general theory is that you should not take everything from the sales tax, but there's a balancing idea. So I think the current 6-ish sales tax is a little high, but it's appropriate considering that our income tax is much higher, 7%.
Yeah.
So I do think all of those ideas are valid, but generally speaking, at this point, you would think that the money which is available should go towards paying to reducing income tax rather than sales tax, because our state income tax is quite regressive and quite high. And I would expect both our side, as in the Republican caucus, to ask for reduction in the income tax across the board. I would suggest across the board reduction from folks who pay 5% to 5.5% to 6%. So to really make our state more attractive to everyone, to people who make, to middle class especially, and people who make more. We should basically cut income taxes across the board for everyone.
Well, I really appreciate you bringing up the middle class on that, because, as you know, I'm on, producing the morning show, and we talk about, all the taxes that's coming up. And, it seems to me that the middle class are the ones that are getting hammered the most, right? There's going to be programs out there for the lower class. The upper class doesn't need to worry about that, obviously, but the middle class, there's zero help for us, right? And we're going to be the ones fitting the bill.
I think that's a real problem, Jimmy. I really think you hit the nail right on the head. Right, that's the challenge Connecticut policymakers have, and that's kind of unfortunate. People talk about helping the middle class, but they really don't. Right. So, for example, here we're talking about energy prices, and energy prices are doubling, or supply prices are doubling. Energy prices are going up significantly. So what does everybody come out and say? When I was in a legislator in a special session, they said, well, we have programs. We have program A, B, C, to help anyone who makes less than the median, 30% of median or 60% of median. So you're going to help people who have economic hardship. I
Yeah,
understand that. I'm not against it. But what about the middle class? Just what you asked.
exactly.
What about the middle class? Well, they'll fend for themselves. They can pay another $80. No, they can't. They're raising families. It's tough on them. And we need to take steps to ensure that affordability for the middle class, whether it be rent, whether it be energy prices, that we make good policy for that. And, I 100% agree with you. That's what we got to talk about more. That's what I'd like to talk about more on this program and other avenues. How do we make life? How do we make policy better for the middle class?
I really appreciate you saying that. I'll definitely invite you back on. But before I let you go, we got about 3 minutes, Mr. We got about 3 minutes. I want to talk to you about something. And now it's going to be funny because you're a conservative. I'm a conservative. We're both on the Republican side here. And I might disagree with you on this one, actually. Let's go ahead and talk about the legalization of marijuana in the state of Connecticut. Real quick, we're going to get some policy out of the way here. Do you think the licenses were distributed fairly here in the state of Connecticut?
Listen, that was a big disaster. A big disaster. Yeah, there's just no two doubts about that. No two, the whole idea was that you have these 12 licenses now, and over a period of time, about 100 licenses to grow and to sell marijuana, to sell cannabis around the state. And the question was, we are going to form a social equity council and give it based upon who has been hurt more. And there are two different questions, Jimmy. One is, if there are any taxes collected, how we spent those. And I do not have anything against that. If you say, well, we're going to try to benefit communities or spend that money for the communities which were hurt more, that's one question. But the other thing is, who gets to run these businesses? Who gets to own these businesses? It has to be people who are best capable of running good businesses so that cannabis stays away from the hands of minors and those who shouldn't have it. The cannabis is produced and dispensed very safely and quality. And there is to ensure that there is never, offhand usage, right? So the whole idea, and costs be low and prices be more reasonable, right? So none of those things have been taken into account, thinking as if anybody can run any business. And that's just not true. Anybody can learn any business, and that's also just not true. So we're trying to give licenses based on a lottery to those who are from towns or communities which were hurt more, and that's just not right. It should have been done much more on a competitive basis based upon who can run those best. But at the same time, taking the tax dollars could have been given to the communities which have been hurt more.
Absolutely, I agree 100%. I like to use the comparison. I'm just going to start handing out heart surgeon certificates. So you can be a heart surgeon because you were from a poor neighborhood. Now, do you really want to go see that heart surgeon? Is that the guy you really want to go see to get surgery, or do you want to see the person? Now, mind you, I have never once mentioned color, right? But they always bring it around to color. Or do you want to go see the guy who went to the school, was most qualified, got straight A's in medical school? Do you want that guy to be your surgeon, or the guy that we just handed a piece of paper to? Right?
That's right. Those licenses should have been handed over to the folks who could run the business best, period. Who brought equity, who brought meaning capital to the table, who had experience, who had ability to run those businesses, who would assure that those businesses were run in the best way, in the safest way, because there's a big safety factor in running a business which sells, a substance like that. And
there's got to be a lot of liability, right? There's got to be a lot of liability involved with that.
I think, yeah, you would think so. It's a tough business, and you also, one has to realize that because federally it is still against the law, so it's a very difficult business financially as well, because any of the cost cannot be included as a cost for tax purposes. So think about a business in which any costs are actually, and people don't know this, but when I spoke to folks who were competing for those licenses, they were telling me this is an incredibly difficult business because for federal purposes, this is not a business because you're breaking the law. Because federally, marijuana is still not legal.
That
Under
is
federal law,
insane.
you are still basically breaking a law if you're selling marijuana. That's a conflict between state law and federal law, and hopefully at some day in time it's going to be harmonized. But that's how it is at this point.
You can. It's very easy to see why viewers here why Harry Aurora is one of my favorite representatives. I've talked to him several times. He's just a very, very intelligent man. He knows his stuff. I mean, finance has been his world, right, for a very long time. Representative Aurora, I truly appreciate you coming on to the show, being our first guest here in the year 2023.
I really enjoyed it, and thanks for having me, and Happy New Year to your viewers again, and hope to speak to you all again very soon.
We will definitely be speaking again. Thank you very much. Happy New Year, Mr. Aurora.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, thank you so much for joining us. Get all your latest headlines concerning CT by visiting ctpolitics.tv/headlines-news and follow us at CT Politics TV on all social media platforms. Before I wrap it up, I want to give a special thanks to Dr. Amy Chai for designing and making our beautiful set design here, graphics. She does a great job for us. I couldn't do it. So I truly, truly appreciate it, Dr. Chai. And that does it for us. We'll be back tomorrow night at 5 for CT Politics. Thanks to Harry Aurora for joining us. And thank you so much for tuning in. From all of us at CT Politics, I'm Jimmy J saying good night and God bless.